do you see anything that lifts your spirits a little bit? Anything that on the landscape or the horizon that may feel a bit positive to you?
I'll jump in. Anytime I think we see people standing up for the freedom of institutions, the freedom of speech, freedom of expression, I am thrilled to see it. We've seen way too many people bending the knee, making the compromise, but we just had a number of universities stand up and say, nope, they were offered, the Trump administration tried to offer them this deal where if they would basically comply and agree to be monitored and give up all kinds of independence, they could get preferential treatment in government funding. And so that's where this is headed. People may not know that's happening, but the Trump administration is trying this kind of carrot strategy now with universities, trying to get them to comply with all kinds of anti-DEI things and also give up a lot of independence of their faculty, what faculty are teaching, books will and will not appear on syllabi, like what their admissions policies look like, all of that. But we had nine, MIT plus eight, so nine schools that all stood together and said, actually, no. So I'm just going to read them out because I want to give them all a shout out here. So MIT, Vanderbilt, the University of Pennsylvania, Dartmouth College, the University of Southern California, the University of Texas at Austin, the University of Arizona, Brown University, and the University of Virginia. So as you hear that list, you'll notice that it's private and public
Mm.
institutions, right, that are kind of being hit in this way. But they basically all stood up and just said, yeah, no, like this. These are principles with which we disagree, and they spelled it out in letters back to the administration. They didn't just kind of quietly say no, but they loudly said no, and just said, like for example, they said fundamentally the premise of the document, the government's document, is inconsistent with our core belief that scientific funding should be based on scientific merit alone. In other words, not by currying favor with the administration, and stood up for freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and their own independence as an institution. So I'm, for one, any victory like this, and particularly one that is about solidarity and institutions standing. And remember, these institutions are competitors, right? I mean, they're all competing for students. So there is a kind of perverse incentive for many of these institutions to throw each other under the bus. But nonetheless, they're and to get the competitive advantage. But they all instead said, nope, nope, we're actually going to stand together here against this, what certainly coercive and manipulative way of kind of trying to get them to give up their independence.
That is good. Diana, had you paid attention to that one, or was there any other news that you were like, huh, well, I'm pleasantly surprised?
Well, there has been, I think, good news out of the protest fronts. We'll talk, I know a little bit more about No Kings at the end, but it's been really fun to watch those protests in Portland. I mean,
Mm.
Mm.
unicorns dancing. The frog man is now famous. The chicken suit people, the folks on bicycles and unicycles going by, and so while there has been the really violent parts that have been mostly directed against nonviolent protesters, like the Presbyterian minister who got shot with the pepper balls. A lot of it has been really well, I think, executed by the protesters to keep the environment from straying into provoking the government into negative actions. And so I think that's really good news. I've been looking at this, and I'm trying to figure out exactly where it is. The Lutheran bishops came out with a new letter about Christian nationalism. They also have a new head of their communion. the Lutherans elected an African American bishop, black bishop, for the first time to be the head of the ELCA, big, more liberal Lutheran denomination, and they seem to be finding their feet under them,
Mm.
to be protesting more vigorously and theologically, which is, of course, the Lutherans' real strong suit, against Christian nationalism. And that means that a number of denominations now have come out with formal statements from their highest ruling bodies saying that Christian nationalism is a heresy. And
Mm.
we have to be able to cheer that. And I'm looking forward to a couple more of those denominations coming up to the plate and doing the same. And I think it's just really fantastic for the ones who have led the way, either in bringing suits against the Trump administration to stop particular policies, mostly around immigration, or to take on the theological abuse of their traditions, and to encourage. And when the bishops do that, or a national organization does that, then that encourages all the clergy all the way down in deeper in the structures, to be braver about addressing their congregations and making these issues front and center in local churches. So it's a real way to back clergy who want to be able to take part in protests and also address some of the real theological and spiritual issues that are caught up in this political moment. I think that's a great thing too.
Absolutely. And on my part, historian, so I'm always scanning the landscape for positive developments in history. And one of them is more popular culture oriented. I just had the opportunity to interview Clint Smith, who's a writer for The
Wow.
Atlantic. And it
Yeah.
was about this. This is a special issue of The Atlantic called The Unfinished Revolution. Really gorgeous panels and paintings and all of this stuff here. But it's sort of it comes in the context of the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, which is, of course, happening next year, 2026. And it is very troublesome, very concerning that this anniversary, which calls for accurate historical truth telling, is coming under this
Mm.
regime that has been adamantly opposed to a full, robust accounting of history in any ways that they deem look unpatriotic. So they keep saying they want a patriotic education or patriotic history, which means tell all the shiny, happy parts and downplay or erase anything that makes the United States look bad. So in the midst of all of that, the Atlantic kind of wants to get ahead of the curve there. And before 2026, they have this offering called the Unfinished Revolution, talking about the founding of the nation. And so it's sort of similar in composition to the 1619 project, at least in my head. A variety of contributors, most of them historians, scholars, experts in some way, and they are all pontificating on different aspects of the founding. So with Clint Smith, he wrote an article about how real should the history at Colonial Williamsburg be, or does it need to be?
Mm.
And the idea was 31 years ago, they had this reenactment of a slave auction that was incredibly realistic and therefore incredibly disturbing. They haven't done it since, and it got these mixed reactions. Some thought it was very honest and necessarily shocking history. Other people, including Black people, protested it and just use that as a kernel to talk more broadly about the telling and retelling of history at a place like Williamsburg. So I'm glad that we have this offering. I'm glad that we have narratives and stories to push back against the propagandized versions of history that are going to come on even stronger as we approach July 4th, 2026 and beyond. So that was one thing that I was looking at as, all right, well, at least we got something we can argue about.
Yeah, I think a lot of people right now are like, okay, this is it. We're going to use our voices. We're going to use our platforms. We're tired of being scared. I think that is one of the
Mm,
main feelings I'm kind of running into right now, is instead of people just being frozen in fear, it's like they are beginning to move off of that and say, no, I'm not going to live this way. I have a voice, I have a vote. I'm going to use both of those things as long as I can. And so um, I think that there's a little bit of a turn in the grassroots about that. And maybe they're seeing institutions like the educational institutions, or a major magazine like The Atlantic, or they're seeing the Lutheran bishops stand up. And that makes, even a few institutions do that, it gives so much courage to regular folks so they feel less alone.
Yep. I'm going to add one more before we leave this topic. Don't I
Three's our
don't really
limit
want to
for
be accused
positive.
of having too much good news. That's never really
Right.
my role. But since Kristen's not here, maybe we just do the whole thing on good news.
Oh, very good.
One joke at Kristen's expense while she's not here to defend herself. But I will throw out one more that did again give me a little uplift, and that is that Pete Hegseth, the head of the Department of Defense. I refuse to call it Department of War. It is still the
Thank
Department of
you.
Defense, no matter how much Pete Hegseth wants to call it the Department of War. He does not have the authority to change that name himself. So he is head of the Department of Defense, and he tried to sort of make all of the press pool that covers the DoD sign a thing saying they would not publish anything that had not been pre-approved. So in other words, they're going to like pre-submit their stories to the DoD Communications Department to proofread and say, oh yeah, you can or you cannot say that before they go to press, even if it's unclassified information, right? And thankfully, again, all of the press pool turned in their badges and
Mm.
said, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. And that includes, by the way, Pete Hegseth's former employer, Fox News. Now that one I was not prepared for. I would not have. I would have had to take a drink if we were playing a drinking game on that one. But Fox joined the other four major broadcast networks, and they said this. I'm going to read the statement here. It's short, but it's heartening. It says, today, we join virtually every other news organization in declining to agree to the Pentagon's new requirements, which would restrict journalists' ability to keep the nation and the world informed of important national security issues. The policy is without precedent and threatens core journalistic protections. We will continue to cover the U.S. military as each of our organizations has done for many decades, upholding the principles of a free and independent press. So, bravo. Hats off.
Oh, there were two other pieces. So when Kristen isn't here, we really do go after the good news. I was really impressed by the announcement of the Nobel Peace Prize. And they had just a really quite stirring justification about their choice, about how they sit in a room surrounded by the portraits of all the Nobel laureates, and they want to honor the integrity of those past winners. And then, of course, I'm thinking through all the amazing people who've won the Nobel Peace Prize since its inception, and many people who are personal heroes of mine as a historian. And then they also took on a real stirring defense of democracy. And so I thought that was great to see them just stand up and say, we're not going to be lobbied, we're not going to be pushed around, you can't do this, we have these values and they are rock solid, and whatever you're going to do from there, we don't care. And so I thought that was great. And then the other thing is, I do think it is worth saying that the thing in Gaza could be potentially good news. But I feel like the three of us, I don't want to completely speak for all of us, but at least those of us who are here today, um, we do want the war in Gaza to stop. We do want the violence in Gaza to stop. Anything that stops it, we're willing to say that's great. And I think we're also sort of holding back our enthusiasm a little because we're not entirely trustworthy of what has been decided is going to reach the ends of a genuine and just peace.